Hi, welcome to week 4. Well, we're entering the midpoint of the course here. Congratulations on that. I hope you've enjoyed the ride so far. And this week speaking of uh, sort of rides, we're going to add a new layer to narrative this week is referred to in narrative terms or the narrative world as migration of identity. And it's really about looking at our lives and our stories as just that, as a journey, a migration that starts, you know, in with birth and early childhood, and then moves through stages throughout our lives to the point where we are in our journey now, and then we also have the journey that lies ahead. So it's really one of the another helpful aspect of narrative is helping folks look at their lives as this sort of cumulative migration. How did we get to this point in our story? How did we get to where we are today, and how we interpret where we are today? And the really exciting thing and empowering thing about migration of identity perspective is it'll that we can go back and we can, because remember again that reality, in the sense that we're working with reality here, is constantly being reconstructed. We have, so that the healing that lies within a journey or a migration of identity sort of approach is or viewpoint is that it allows us to reclaim and sometimes rename, reprioritize, or change our interpretation of certain points in our journey. For example, worked with a woman not too long ago who her journey of identity was very much marked by some key events in her life, as all of ours are. And in her case, she had sort of carved up her life of, she was a younger woman, and she was, in looking at her life thus far in her journey to this point, the significant events were sort of before her. It was before her father's death. Her father died when she was young, as a young teen, and then after her father's death, and then when she eventually left home at a relatively early age and started her own life in her own place and began working in her late teens to support herself. So from a journey of migration of identity standpoint, she was holding some really stressful, distressful, really, interpretations of that time period when her father died and what happened around that time period, and then what happened after that until she moved out. And she was able to go back and do some amazing work around reclaiming that time period and reconstructing that period in her migration of identity, and that was actually a lot of her narrative work. When she got through that, we spent a little bit of time on a few other narrative aspects of her situation, but the majority of her healing and growth occurred in that the details of that migration of identity. We spent several sessions on that. So that'll be different for everybody. I like to map migrations of identity with people, and you're going to have a chance this week to, when you look at this week's discussion, You're going to be submitting your first videos. Yay! Very exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are. So I've intentionally kept the discussions much lighter this week, and the readings. So for this week's discussion, you're going to create your own migration of identity, a visual version of that, however you choose to do that. Oftentimes with people, when I do migrations, we do it on a big poster board, or we use whiteboard and then take pictures of it, or you can use the sticky flip charts, or one of my favorites. I have some right here. Post-it. The post-it flip charts are really useful. So I keep some of those in my office, and I keep some in my car, so that if I'm doing doing sessions in home with folks, you can stick those anywhere. They don't hurt the walls, and you can really let people create however it works for them to visually display their journey. You usually will have some kind of a line, that goes up and down based on sort of peaks and valleys in a person's life. And in the case of the young woman I talked about, she had, sort of a higher point along until her dad's death, and then she had quite a dip, and she had this valley that she then came out of as she moved out on her own, created her own life. So and you can add little drawings along the way. You can collage things from, whatever works. You can, you do what works for you. So you'll be doing that this week, and I encourage you to just relax and enjoy that. And all of these self awareness, self participation assignments in this course are geared to, are intended to help continue to get you thinking more deeply about how narrative applies to your own life, in preparing you for the final assignment, where you will write about that in some detail. So the other exciting thing, of course, is that you're going to work with Eve. Eve is a composite of a woman that I worked with. A very amazing individual, and dealing with a lot, as you'll see in the case study, and going to ask you to pick up from a certain point in the narrative conversation with Eve, and use that as the launch point for your practice videos this week. So again, as I've talked about earlier, don't stress about perfection in the video. Really try to practice some before you video yourselves. You can practice on the technology that we've given you here, that you've downloaded. You can practice as many times as you want. Do some shorter sessions, and then when you really think you're ready, go ahead, hit record, and go for it. And if you don't like it partway in, stop. You can pause too. When you're recording, you can pause, you can talk for a minute, and then continue recording. That's absolutely fine. Or if you just totally don't like something, you can just stop, delete, and start again. So have fun with it. Your instructors and myself, we're very excited to see you live and in session. It's the best way that we can give you a developmental and growth-oriented feedback. So, as well as highlight all your wonderful strengths, which I know you all have. So that's where we are. You have one video that I hope you find interesting. It's related to migration of identity. It's a form of migration of identity for survivors of domestic violence. So I hope you enjoy that, and I'll see you next week, and have fun with those videos.